Okay, I think we'll get started now. So hello everybody, welcome to our latest Switched Online webinar where we'll be discussing finding silent residents with data with the team from CHP. Just got a couple of housekeeping bits to go through this morning. So first of all, please feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A box, which is in the top right hand side of your screen where you see the question mark. We'll pick up questions at the end of the session. Just to let you know as well, we've got another Switched Online booked in for April where we will have our head of product and CEO joining, our head of commercial, apologies, and we'll also have a poll or a couple of poll questions during the session. We'd really appreciate you joining in and contributing to that. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey just for your feedback. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions because it'll inform our upcoming sessions. And just to mention the April webinar that we've got coming up, this will be specifically on our new product Swift, which will be hosted by Sam Connaught and Tom Longley from Switchee. They'll be covering the core challenges Swift was built to address, how that product is working in practice, including features and capabilities, and some real world examples of how this is already unlocking value for housing providers to identify damp and mould and overheating risks. But to move on, we're going to be introducing Barry McCarthy from CHP. Barry is the operations supervisor and is been working with us for at least the last 2 years and has got a wealth of insights into how CHP has been deploying Switchee and also managing their damp and mould. I'm Emma Bitting. I'm Customer Success Manager at Switchee. I've been here for 4 years. I work very closely with our customers after they purchase Switchee to ensure they're unlocking the value from the data and really understanding how they can get the most from the data and the communication capabilities. We work with a number of customers to do that, and often I'm bringing that insight from customers who've already rolled out their Switchee devices and to bring that insight to anybody that is looking to use data to make more informed decisions. So I'm going to hand over to Barry so he can introduce himself and explain how CHP have been working to date. Over to you, Barry. Oh, we can't hear you, Barry. No. Typical. This worked before. Still can't hear you. Let me try going on to mute and see if it helps. Apologies, everyone. Barry may have to log out and log back in again. Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to carry on and we'll come back to Barry's introduction as I'll go through the next bits of slides. I still can't hear you, Barry. We'll carry on. I may do, Barry, oh, you've come off mute. Do you want to just try? No, it's not working. Barry, if you don't mind, I'll do your quick introduction. Brilliant. So as I said, CHP have been working with Switchee for a number of years. They provide over 27,000 people with a home and 12,000 homes that are owned or managed by CHP. They have on average 39,000 planned or responsive repairs in a year, and year to date have approximately 2,000 reports or 2,200 reports of damp and mould. This is an increase on last year of 11%. But since October 27th, with the introduction of Awaab's law, they've had approximately 1,250 reports of DMC. That's an increase of 23% year on year. And 59% of those have been raised as an emergency response, compared to 48% raised as a 5-day urgent case in the previous year. Currently, CHP have 2,000 switches installed, or nearly 2,000 switches installed. As of this morning, it was just under that. We've got 6 to go. And CHP have recorded a 40% reduction in resident declines when the switchie has been positioned as a damp and mould solution, which is a really positive demonstration of how, when the resident can see a real benefit to technology, that they are willing to have it installed in their homes. CHP have been on a journey with introducing the Salesforce damp and mould module that started last autumn, and they have an upcoming merger as of the 1st of April this year with Estuary Housing, which will create Delta Housing. I'm hoping that Barry will join us again, but I'll go on to talking through Switchee. So Switchee has been around for over 10 years. It was our 10th birthday last year, and we were created with the intention of improving the quality of life for people living in rented homes. We are collecting billions of data points every year. We're tracking over 16 billion data points today, and we work with over 120 enterprise customers exclusively in social housing. And then in terms of the Switchee ecosystem, so Switchee has the core product, which is the Switchee thermostat, which is a hub. That device has a payload of sensors in it. There are 5 sensors, including air pressure, humidity, light, motion, temperature. That device has an integral SIM card to it, doesn't rely on any Wi-Fi from the residents, and that SIM card capability means that our data can be surfaced up to our cloud. Those data points are captured every 5 to 10 minutes, giving us real-time data insights into what's happening in a home. The device is Z-Wave enabled, which is essentially an industrial Bluetooth, which means that we can also connect to a number of sensors. They may be sensors such as additional thermostats, controlling multi-zones, but also including energy clamps and also CO2 monitoring and so on. Essentially, any device that has Z-Wave enabled technology can connect to the Switchee thermostat as the hub. Most recently, we've also introduced 2 new products. One is the Vantaxia Revive 7, which is Switchee enabled, meaning that we can see exactly how that fan is performing in the home, and that data is surfaced via the Switchee portal. And then we've also launched our Swift sensor, and the principle with the Swift sensor is it is a very quick deployment, easy to install, doesn't rely on any technical ability or an electrician, and that is for quick deployment for damp and mould, but we're also using it for homes that are identified as overheating. Switchee has also got the ability to connect to a mobile app, which means that the residents can control the heating from out of the home and easily set schedules as well. That data that is collected via the Switchee is surfaced up to our cloud, where we also collate and overlay external information such as EPCs, also weather data, and that also is how we build our algorithm, which gives us our risk metrics. This is surfaced via the Switchee portal, via numerous housing management systems. There are a lot of housing systems that we can connect to, and that's connected via our open API, which means that if there's the ability to ingest API data, it can go into any housing management system that you require it to. But equally, we have a number of clients that are using other platforms such as Power BI and Tableau in order to surface it into existing reports, and quite often that is used as a stepping stone into integration into housing management systems. Have we got Barry back yet before I go on to the next slide? It's going to make it a very difficult conversation when I'm talking to myself. Can't see him. Right, let's carry on. So we've got a poll here, so I'd appreciate you contributing here. So the question is, how confident are you that your data identifies residents with property issues before they complain? So the options are very confident, confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, and not confident at all. Okay, looks like we've settled down on the responses. So I'm going to end the poll. Okay, so we had about 50% of people responding to that. And now it's my poll results have disappeared. That's annoying. Anyway, it looked like the majority of people were saying that they're just not confident at all. It was around 23% of people who were saying, oh, there we go, it's back on my screen. 21% were confident, 29% somewhat confident, 50% not very confident. Nobody was saying that they were not confident at all. So it looks like it's a real mixed bag, but the bias is very much towards not very confident. I suppose the challenge there is that at the moment, the majority of our responses are based on being reactive as opposed to proactive. And also there is the concern around damp and mould for residents about reporting on what the implications of that could be. So I'm not entirely surprised by that. So hopefully in today's session, we can give you some insights into how you can mitigate some of that concern. Thank you. Got Kiki in the background helping me. So I did have a question for Barry here. No sign of Barry coming back. I'm going to try and talk around this because obviously I've been working with Barry most recently on this programme, but as I mentioned earlier, CHP have been working with Switchee for over 3 years, well before Awaab's law was implemented. The technology has been in place, but we did really notice that there was a shift in attitude from the organisation and appetite, knowing that Awaab's law was going to come in October 25. And the decision was taken for Switchee to be an integral part of the DMC strategy, which meant that the decision was taken that when any case was raised, a Switchee device would be installed to give the teams more information and understanding about what was happening and what was really driving the DMC issues in that home. Switchee also conducted some research in early 2025, identifying that ventilation was a key driver for damp and mould in the CHP stock. And it has informed over the last year some other decisions that CHP have taken in terms of starting to integrate the Revive 7. CHP were already using Ventaxia products when the Revive 7 was released in the middle of last year. The decision was taken to onboard on a trial, and now the Revive 7s are being installed in the retrofit homes going through on wave 3, but also on any homes where it's identified that new ventilation is required. So really the understanding of Switchee and how powerful the data could be from the thermostat was already appreciated when the Ventaxia Revive 7 was launched, and we're starting to see those devices coming onto the portal now, and the wave 3 installations are going at pace as well. Over the last year, whilst working with the DMC team, this has involved working very closely with the operatives, making sure that they understand the importance of Switchee and how to talk about it to residents, but equally that they have that resource and the data available to them after works have been completed to see what impact that's had, and also to utilise the communications to be able to identify proactively residents that may be at risk of damp and mould that have not been raised previously. But the key has been, over the last year, working with the damp and mould team, is really to give them the confidence that the data is there to support them and to resolve damp and mould issues for CHP residents. The team at CHP has grown, so Barry leads that damp and mould team as the coordinator. They have a DLO at CHP, and they have dedicated team of 4 operatives on the damp and mould team, alongside damp and mould administrator. I work very closely with Ben, and we review the data. There's visibility of any cases that have a Switchee installed, and Ben is utilising the data to understand whether or not there has been any shift in the metrics as a result of works that have been completed, but also we work closely together to identify homes that have already had a damp and mould case raised against them, and then we will only target homes that have no open damp and mould cases. This is the first route into finding residents that haven't reported things previously. So what we're doing is we're aligning with the damp and mould policy or procedures that CHP have in place. We're enriching that process by reaching out proactively to those residents. Ah ha 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 ha. Right, Barry.
Can you hear me? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry about that. I think
Don't worry. Welcome.
My laptop isn't used to live events and obviously had stage fright, and so decided that it wouldn't give me a microphone or any speakers. So,
don't worry. Thank you so much, Barry, for pursuing that. I know it's quite troublesome. Should we go back and give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more around what you've been doing in your role?
Okay, within my role, so obviously DMC operations supervisor for CHP. I was tasked with the mission following the coroner's verdict in November 2022 to put together a team that can respond to reports of DMC and manage the risk. Obviously, that coincided pretty much with our decision to use Switchee devices. Am I right about that, Emma? Around about that sort of time, maybe a little bit before that, the decision was made to use the Switchee devices. And so in that time, we've been building processes, adapting to the environment with the regulatory and statutory changes, the varying guidance that would come about. So we've never been able to settle on a clear process. But yeah, so that's been my role up to this point, and then obviously we've transitioned through trying to adapt the data-led technologies that we've got. Obviously, one of those being Switchee.
Thank you, Barry.
No worries.
Just in terms of, sorry, people, I'm just going to have to skip through to get to these points. So I haven't got to answer asking you any questions specifically, but I think it's more useful just from rather than getting my perspective, Barry, is how have you noticed the shift in the organisation's appetite to using Switchee and data as part of your core DMC strategy since last October?
Yeah, so I mean, the organisation's appetite, I think it was obviously a strategic decision to use Switchee ahead of implementing it into processes. So it's just about getting the devices into properties. And then obviously in the time since then, it's about trying to move from having the data come in and then what we do with the data. I think the challenge for us has been that we've been very reactive, as I kind of alluded to before. We've had to just adapt to the changing environment, the changing guidance. Never really sure about what's going to be required of us until fairly recently. So we've been very much using Switchee as a kind of diagnostics tool. So it gives us the data of how heating's being used, the amount of humidity in a property, and fundamentally that's the way we've been using it up until fairly recently, when we've been working with you to refine the sort of data that we get, so that we can then start to think about moving into a proactive strategy and using that data to kind of get ahead of the instances of damp and mould and try and engage with our customers in advance of that.
And obviously, I mentioned earlier when you weren't on the webinar about the increase in cases that you've seen post the law being implemented. How has that been managed? Is it been a challenge for the team, or actually you finding it's been quite a useful learning journey in how you're managing cases since the law's been implemented?
Well, I mean, all of those will be true. It's definitely been a learning journey, but the challenge has been in trying to ensure that we cover off our obligation to respond to emergencies within 24 hours. So that was, we didn't have that obligation prior to 27th of October, and so we've tried to develop a triaging where we don't run the risk of missing those cases that we need to respond to immediately. And in so doing that, we've developed a process that has led to about 60% of our cases being defined as emergency, which has been a very big challenge for us and has kind of hindered any sort of idea that we might want to be more proactive in this busy season. And so we're just entirely proactive and just trying to cope with those huge number of emergency responses that we're getting. So once we're over this, then again we can start thinking about using data to try and avoid this situation in the next peak season.
Yeah, and I suppose as we're coming to the end of the official damp and mould season, hopefully, then it does give you the headspace to be able to reflect back on the last 6 months, figure out where those challenges were, and hopefully have a plan for the next damp and mould season.
Yeah. I mean, we're still growing the number of properties that are going to have Switchee devices in. So at the moment we're at 2,000. I think you've mentioned that we manage about 12,000. So we've essentially got a two-tier service where we're going to be able to be more proactive with those properties that have Switchee devices in, be able to monitor that through the warmer season, and also then historically relate to the data we have so that we can anticipate what the need will be going into the next season. I say that's like a growing offer that we've got at the moment. It's 2,000 out of 12,000, so we've still got that challenge to deal with the other properties that aren't served. Having said that, the data that we do get from Switchee, I'm sure we'll be able to make generalizations, I think, according to property type, so we can look at the data that we do have from any given property category, and then kind of extrapolate from that to define, well, we may well have problems in these properties as well.
Yeah.
So
it's being more strategic in your approach in future years as opposed to purely reactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously you didn't have a system for capturing the process of under Awaab's law previously, and that's where the decision to build your Salesforce integration last year, which I know that you implemented very quickly. But obviously, whilst you were doing that, there was a lot of attention going to that. We didn't want to be losing the momentum or even the data that we were capturing from the Switchee. So how was the DMC team using the Switchee home scan reports? We've got a damp and mould home scan report which looks at causation. How did you use that while that Salesforce system was being built? Because there was a lot going on in the organisation and meant that we didn't have the resource necessarily to dedicate completely to Switchee data. Yeah,
so the initial home scan reports obviously were they related to ventilation assessments. I'm correct about that one, yeah. So
yeah.
During that build phase of Salesforce, that was occurring towards the late summer into early autumn. And so before that, we did have resources, and so we were using that data that we had from the reports to reach out to those customers. We spent a lot of time during the summer catching up on cases that were open from the previous winter period, and then just tracking those through for progress and looking for every opportunity to get ahead of what was to come in the next winter period. And so the home scan report definitely fed into that. It gave us a list of all the properties that we could capture where ventilation was an issue, and so that was primarily our target. Really was just to target those properties that were poorly ventilated, or could do with improved ventilation, and also pick up on any other insulation programs that we had. So we kind of coincided those two elements in anticipation of what was to come.
It was interesting because I didn't get the impression whilst we were doing that there was the concern that we were adding to the workload as such, because ultimately you felt they would be coming down the line anyway. So you felt like this was a way of getting ahead of those challenges for the winter season, and to target those homes that were most at risk, and you had a good idea of what the main driver of that may have been.
Yeah, so the remediation is pretty straightforward. You know, for us in the first instance, when someone reports DMC, we're looking for the causes, and it can only be, you know, one of three categories. You know, we're even looking at something needs to be repaired, something needs to be improved, or some circumstances within the property that are giving rise to the conditions. So, you know, for us getting ahead of that and dealing with those property related issues means that we can then focus on the more customer related issues that, you know, we then need to explore as a business, what support we can provide, what guidance we can provide, but also that so we can be sure of our own risk and making sure that, you know, the property is not causing, you know, the situation, and so we can target the support much quicker. We're not wasting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know that this is something that evolved over the course of the winter, which was your categorization. And that was an ask of the organization as a result of one of the first times you're actually having the visibility of things that were directly under your control. So things like the building fabric specification, but also things that may be harder to manage, which would be looking more at the circumstance in the home, which could be anything from that vulnerabilities of that resident, or the fact that the property you've experienced hoarding issues, or you have a resident who may be struggling with fuel poverty. So by starting those buckets, has that given you more power to have conversations in the organisation and ask for the help and support in the future, do you think?
Well, I think that there was a sector-wide, and the listeners might be able to relate to this, a sector-wide response to the outcome of Ishaq's death, which was that we can't blame lifestyle, and that was taken to mean that we can't talk about it, we can't deal with it, we have to repair our way out of this problem. And our organisation was very similar. We dealt with processes that were in there. Let's fix the houses. And then, you know, we won't have the problem, but it's as true now as it was then that, you know, the way a building is being used is one of the contributory factors. As an organisation, we must make sure that it's not a property defect or deficiency that's causing it. But, you know, we still need to take account of it, and that's the challenge now. And so with this sort of data that you've got up on the screen now, you know, we are then able to categorize it effectively, and therefore present it back to the business as a modification or moderation of strategy, so that we are looking at ourselves as what sort of support we can provide to people, to be able to use their property in a way that is more comfortable for them and safer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this isn't just something that we've applied to Switchee data as well. You're actually using this as part of your damp and mould operatives process. They're categorising what they're identifying when they go to the property as well for cases that aren't reported through Switchee.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, that was very much about a reactive position, where actually we didn't know, but we were responding to the metrics and what we could see, and that's why we positioned this as a finding silent residents in a reactive way. Moving on to how we've been proactive with that is where we introduced the damp and mould triaging via the Switchee, where we looked at any homes that had no open cases on your systems, and where we cross-referenced that with Switchee high-risk homes and also those properties that had been at high risk for the longest. We bucketed those in December and January of this year, and this was working alongside your standard reporting of damp and mould. And this is where Salesforce had kicked in, and as cases were raised or open, we triaged residents, we identified homes, you started using your Salesforce process to ingest the Switchee information to raise cases in the same way. So when we were working on the ventilation cases, that was more a reactive repair, whereas from December onwards, we've started the damp and mold triaging, but it's feeding directly into Salesforce. I mean, this is an interesting one because, like, we know that it's a core challenge. We've already seen from the stats and the feedback from the poll earlier that the majority of people are finding it a challenge reaching those silent residents, those people who rarely report things or haven't previously. How do you think or feel that using Switchee data to proactively triage these homes has benefited you, and how has that data-led identification fit into your process? Because it can be a bit intimidating going after more, exactly when you said your number of cases are already increased as a result of the law being implemented.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll remember the discussions we had about whether we should delay finding out, considering the weight of demand that we had. And my response was, no, let's find it, let's deal with it, and we'll use the data to learn from. If we find that we can't cope, then we've established a demand that we need to meet, because these are people that aren't reporting it to us themselves. And we need to ensure that it's not just the main tenant that is the person we need to keep safe. It's the other people that use that building, and so that they typically wouldn't respond to us anyway. And so we need to get other avenues of information into us. So this helped in that way. I think the challenge is that the Switchee devices are only in a small number of our properties. So what it does do is it just crystallizes the need that within the properties that have got a Switchee, we can see that there are a lot of our customers that aren't reaching out to us, and we are discovering that the property is in need of some attention, or that there is support required within that household. It solidifies our approach to ensure that wherever we're putting in a boiler replacement, we are putting in a Switchee as a matter of course. Wherever a property becomes void, we are putting a Switchee as a matter of course. That's in the hope that we're going to get into more of the properties that we otherwise wouldn't get monitoring in. We've got a big challenge in those long-standing customers that don't often engage with us, resist any offers, improvements in their home. These are the challenge. And so if we can get devices in there like Switchee that are going to tell us what's going on, then we can just better serve their needs.
Yeah, and I think it's making me think back to a couple of individual cases that we had last year where we actually sort of utilised both tools. We used the ventilation assessments and the triaging, but reversed it. This was earlier last year, where we identified a home where the resident actually said that they didn't have a damp and mould case, but now we have the home scan data. We knew that it was a high risk. We knew there was something going on in the home, but the resident just hadn't confirmed that. It was interesting that the resident didn't confirm damp and mould, but when we asked very specific questions via the Switchee on whether or not their ventilation was working, or they had a ventilation system in their kitchen or bathroom, and then came back and said no, they didn't, they responded to that question because it was very matter of fact, yes or no. And you subsequently had a stock condition survey in that property, and it turned out there was mould in the property, and there were some other support needs that resident had, and they hadn't reported it. And I know that speaking to some of the broader team, resident has also had additional support from the local mental health team and so on. But I think that resident was a perfect example of somebody who was never going to proactively tell you about a problem, and if anything didn't really want to be disturbed, but actually their well-being was being negatively impacted. But unfortunately they were just used to having a home that had mould, and they didn't really want anybody helping them.
Yeah, and it wasn't they didn't want to proactively get in touch with us. They wanted to disguise it. They wanted to avoid telling us. you know, and so, you know, that's a particular challenge. We need to respect people's dignity and their desire to be unmolested and you know, not harassed in any way. But you know, we have to maintain, you know, the standard of the home and ensure that you know, people are living safely and comfortable. So it's a, you know, a balance that we've got to get right. You know, I think that you know, again, the Switchee provides that opportunity, despite some reservations that people might have in terms of their privacy. You know, it does sit there in the background to just let us know that, you know, there's something more that we're being told, and it's just a, you know, an avenue that we need to always be investigating.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just going to quickly move on. We've mentioned the Revive 7, and I thought it was just useful for you to get a bit of context and for the listeners to understand what it is. And I think the Revive 7 is a reflection of exactly what we're doing with the Switchee thermostat, but giving you an enriched data set. And what's really powerful here, it goes back to what Barry was saying about residents not always telling us what's actually happening in the home. So we may be told that ventilation systems are being used, but are they? They may not tell us that there's a problem with the ventilation system because they're not aware, but we could see it without even having to visit the home. So with the Revive 7, again, Z-Wave enabled, we've got a SIM card within it. It's surfacing data directly to the portal, so we can see if there is any excess humidity in that property. We can see how often the boost function is being called for. We can see how the trickle's performing. But most importantly, we can see whether it's on or off, because the data will clearly show us. It's providing as many data points as a Switchee thermostat, and it really makes sure that we've got a system that is on, functioning, and maybe that there's a need for that to be adjusted. And this will be interesting when we're looking at homes that are overcrowded, for instance. We've had instances recently where we've had reports of a lot of dogs in a home, and the excess humidity that can come from having some very large pets in the home is just as important as there being maybe too many people in a home. But whether or not the fan can be configured so that the flow rate is improved, and can change that, or actually would we need to review the ventilation system in this property as a whole. So this is going to be a really powerful tool for your team, Barry, and to get an understanding of what's actually happening and how things are being used, rather than just looking at the heating and the top line total humidity or your relative humidity in the property. So another poll question for you to get involved with. So this time it's, which environmental hazard will be the most operationally challenging to manage under Awaab's law? And there is the choice of underheating, overheating, ventilation failures, or inconsistent thermal performance. Poll results still coming in. Brilliant. I'm going to end the poll there. So, oh, Kiki, could you just resurface them for me? I can't see. There we go. Thank you. So we have 46% reporting underheating as being the biggest operational challenge. And I mean, it makes sense. We understand that underheating can be driven by a number of issues, but if it's fuel poverty that's driving that, the affordability is going to be key. Obviously, we're coming to the end of the winter season, but with everything that's happening in the world at the moment, the prospect of heating bills being even higher, and that lack of control that we're going to have, potentially how we resolve that is going to be the biggest challenge, because how do we support residents to heat a home when they don't have the funds to do so? Followed up by ventilation failures. So I think it backs up what Barry says. We already know that this is a key driver for damp and mould, and ensuring that we know what's going on in a home and how that ventilation is performing. Followed by inconsistent thermal performance. So we know that insulation is a factor there, but it could be the heating system being used optimally. And then finally, overheating. And I think this is going to be an interesting one coming up in phase 2, with underheating and overheating being a consideration. But to date, I don't think overheating has necessarily been something that's been a complaint from residents, or that organisations have been held to account for. I think this is going to be interesting to broaden out the remit of Awaab's law and also the requirements. I mean, Barry, we've spoken a lot about the insights that maybe we haven't used to date. We have got a fuel poverty metric, or we can look at the data from an underheating perspective, but we've never looked at overheating and underheating necessarily. That's going to be a requirement now. We've obviously got 3 years worth of data to look back on. How's that historic data going to be assisting you for the strategic decisions for phase 2 of Awaab's law? I mean, I know that we talked countless times around the fact that damp and mould is not just a responsibility of the damp and mould team, actually is an organisation responsibility, and it can be challenging to get the engagement. I suppose this phase 2 is going to raise that priority up to more than just your team, which I'm sure you're going to be pleased about.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, because I've had to plug my earphones in because I think I lost the microphone again on my laptop. Right, so as an organisation, it's not certain for us at the moment how we're going to deliver on all the other hazards. So it's certainly not certain it's going to come the way the DMC team. I think you kind of alluded to it, that we as a DMC team just deal with the hazard, and then we tell the business, if it's a repair, go and repair it. If it's a design and specification issue, go and improve the building. If it's if the customer needs support, then housing teams need to see what's available and do whatever they can to support. So with things like underheating and overheating, we're working through the processes. So I'm sure that the data that we've collected will be front and center in determining what's the scope of our involvement here, because of course with Awaab's law we're just we're applying the HHSRS principles. So that's to say that we just need to determine whether the property is causing or is the cause of any hazard in this property. So for underheating, that's clearly, does it have a heating system that works as it's supposed to do and is reasonably cost effective? So I think that's an imposition on the business that we need to bottom out to determine whether, some heating systems, I mean, heating oil is obviously one that's relevant at the moment. We've got customers that use heating oil. That's devastating to someone who's on a fixed income, or just can't accommodate a doubling of their heating costs. So that's where we as a business have to be able to identify what the hazard is, identify the cause of the hazard, and then determine our response. So for instance, if they've got heating that's not working properly, that's a repair. We need to be able to capture that and deliver that successfully. But in terms of the data that we have, that's what will help us, especially with boiler performance. For instance, we can see if the boiler's not working, and so where we've got an underheated property, we can it's not there yet, but we can integrate the data that comes from Switchee, integrate that straight into our case management system, and we can have an automated job that's raised to just go and repair that, and the customer doesn't even need to tell us that this is something we can just respond to before it even becomes an underheating issue. We can know that boiler's not going to work when the temperature's dropped, so we can get out there. Overheating, really tricky one. It's not really likely that overheating is a cause of some sort of property failure. Obviously, if you've got control devices that are maintaining a boiler in the on position, then again that can be picked up through what we have. If a customer just is not using it as it's intended to, we can also pick that up as well, and so that can help to drive our responses in those instances.
Yeah, and my understanding as well is that the intention is that you will be expanding Salesforce to be managing all of your HHSRS risks. It won't just be damp and mold. That's been the first module. The hope is that you'll be able to do that for all of your Awaab's law cases, because you're going to need to demonstrate the journey that you're going through of managing those cases. Is this something that is being looked at a more strategic level as well, in terms of how you're responding? Because I'm assuming there isn't an overheating team that's going to be responsible in the way that we've got a DMC team?
No, we haven't resolved that at the moment. So we're now in the project phase of just scoping out how we manage this. So a decision to use Salesforce as the case management tool for all hazards hasn't been completely bottomed out yet. I think it's been given, sort of the green light to pursue that as the likely way we'll manage it, but that's not as yet. So we're deciding at the moment whether we look to cover off our risks in the way that we've always done it, and that's the particular service area picks up on the service need and delivers it, or whether we need to capture this as a in a single sort of assessment as to right, what hazards are there in this property, and capture that and case manage that as a hazard in general terms, before we get to the specific nature of the hazard and what we need to resolve it.
Yeah. Again, it's going to be a real learning curve, I think, from this autumn.
Yeah, again, we're waiting for guidance. There's so much that's not clear at the moment. We don't have definitions of what is overheating and what is underheating. We have suggestions and ideas out there, and we've got our own suspicions of what that might look like. But until that's clearly defined, we can't really know what our obligations are.
No, absolutely. I think that sort of is slightly helpful moving on to talking about Swift. So you've recently, and I say recently, I think the first installation of a Swift device went in for you last Friday. And this is about you capturing information for any cases where there's no switches. And at the moment you've got you're doing a small trial with the DMC team. How are you seeing the Swift deployment being or benefiting your team today, where you don't have switchy data available?
Well, look, I mean, a challenge for switchy devices is it becomes planned works, and so it sits outside of the activities of the DMC teams. So this is for the Connect, the full functioning switchy device, and so there'll be a challenge. We see that there's a high decline rate, from people, even if we're using it as a remedial action for DMC. Customers are not allowing us access. They're not making the time in their day very often. It means them taking time off work. They're just not prepared to do that for this. Those will be the sorts of challenges. And so the Swift offers us an alternative to that. So we're there, the DMC team are there in the property. We identify a need. We need to track. We need data on this. We need to be able to demonstrate to the customer that events are occurring, or we need to satisfy ourselves as to whether the property is performing as we need it to. And so they carry them in the van, and then if they need it, it's a QR code on the back. They scan the QR code, stick it to the wall, and from that moment on, it's feeding data in to the site as the normal Switchee does. So we're early days. I think we've put 3 in situ in this week, and so for us now it's about what do we do going forward? Do we go and retrieve this when we put in a new Switchee device? Do we leave it in there until such time as we decide to take it out, or do we set in a process for going to retrieve it in due course and recycle it in that way?
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that's the principle, is that you have got the choice there of doing both. It could be that you want to still have that Swift device in a property when you install the Switchee, because you may have a more complex case and you're wanting to have that additional information. But equally, if you've got a Switchee in, you're going to have the information and it may be better deployed elsewhere. So it's going to be great to get some feedback from the team on how they've utilised that. I suppose the key benefit with the Swift as well is how quickly you're capturing that information. So the same days you've installed it, you're going to start to capture information rather than having to wait for that installation process. So I think that's going to be really powerful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to, before I open up questions, I'm just going to ask you one more question, Barry. What would be your biggest piece of advice to another provider trying to build their own version of a data-led damp and mould team today?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I mean, giving generalized advice I mean, it's going to be so dependent on what your um, business's appetite for risk is, what their strategy is, what their culture is. All these sort of things feed in. But I would say if you're going to use a data-led model, then you'd have to think big, right? You have to almost imagine it in the way that Jeff Bezos would approach it. You've got to be prepared to use that data in all your systems from the beginning and gear up, to be able to deliver on the data. Because otherwise, what happens is you're forever reacting to things, and you're always behind the curve. I mean, that's okay if you can afford to have a slow start and then ramp it up. But if you need to get going and get going quickly, then you kind of need to invest in the system, invest in your resources, your staff, your training across the organisation, making sure that everybody's on board across the organisation. That's so key, that you don't just leave this as a repairs issue. That this is very holistic. It's about providing safe homes, safe, comfortable homes as a general target, and getting everybody conversant with what a safe home looks like, and what do we do in the event of a home not being safe. And so that requires a lot of input from all of the stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, in the next year, it's not just the fact that Awaab's law is expanding and the number of cases coming in is expanding. Obviously, CHP and Estuary are merging to become Delta Homes as of the 1st of April. That obviously is going to come with its challenges. What is your priority during that merger? Has that been defined yet, or is it just going to be more of the same, and we'll do our best to get through as many cases as possible, but demonstrate that we can manage it?
No, we're much more
No?
ambitious than that. We want to do much better than that. We've got the summer now, so we can, we're building up towards the other categories of hazard coming across in Awaab's law, and so I think we need to take a bit of my own advice there. We need to think big, right? We need to be ambitious. We're taking on something like 50% more properties. We've got to integrate systems. There's lots and lots of challenges there. I mean, just that in itself, integrating those systems. Once we have that and we've got combined access to property data, then we can start thinking about delivering on this. But as I say, we need to think big and attack it.
Love that. Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna do wonders with that, Barry. And it actually is quite interesting, because one of the questions that came up earlier was about your emergency cases, Barry. Doubling the size of the organisation.
Yeah, I just read the question. Yeah. So the
Yeah,
question says, your emergency cases seems high. Can you briefly tell us how you categorise an emergency? So I can tell you that it doesn't just seem high; it is very, very high. We categorise the hazard in the first stage in triage. That's based on questions that we ask the person who's reporting it, usually the customer, and then we couple that using like a risk matrix methodology to then consider the effect of the hazard on the occupants and people use the building, and then that gives us a hazard rating. We then, after we attend or during the inspection, we then recategorize the hazard. And so there we see a massive disparity. So in our triaging, we're defining 60% as emergency. In our inspection analysis, it's less than 1%. So we've got something wrong, but we're not missing anything. So as far as risking, missing opportunities to make the home safer at the earliest opportunity, we're going to cover that off. But of course, we're setting ourselves up for a challenge that we're struggling to meet in meeting those time frames for that. So how we categorize emergency is it's fundamentally the extent of the hazard. So we grade that according to whether the customer or whoever's looking at thinks it's slight, moderate, or severe. and then we ask if there's any illnesses that are being affected by damp and mould, if there's anybody under the age of 14, and then if the answer to any of those is yes, then that then tells its story. That's why we're getting such a high number, because you can imagine in social housing there's a disproportionate amount of people that have illness. They're very often children in their home, and so this is the driver for that high number.
There's another question here about case management system and whether or not it's been easy to integrate the data, Barry.
Short answer, no, not easy to integrate the data. So the reason for the case management system that we adopted is because we had disparate systems, none of which spoke to each other in any way that we could integrate the data to provide us with an outcome. And so the biggest challenge we had was in doing the letters within 3 days. That needed to be automated. We didn't have the resources to be able to go through every single case that we attend and compile a letter for each one. It had to be automated, and for that we needed to be able to draw in property data, customer data, case data, so investigation data and outcome data, and so that's what Salesforce provides, and so that's why it's there fundamentally. I hope that's the detail that the questioner needed. So perhaps they'll follow up if not.
Let me just see if there's anything come back on that. I can't see anything. Somebody asking about the CMS system. Again, that's in the process of being reviewed at the moment, I think, Barry.
So I don't see the question. I can't see the question you're looking at.
You can't see the question. It was a follow-up from that. Which CMS system are you using? We are looking for a non-spreadsheet solution ourselves.
Yeah, spreadsheets.
Yeah, get rid of the spreadsheets.
Terrible, terrible. So spreadsheets is how we were doing it. You're right, absolutely terrible. The business loses contact. We end up working in a silo. Just terrible outcomes, really. So Salesforce is the case management system. So we had it designed off the back of another housing association, the way they were using it. So it's not entirely bespoke to us, but it delivers what we need.
And I think, are we all there on questions now? Oh, one more. It's just relating to networks, and this was a Switchee question. So Switchee isn't assigned to a specific SIM, so we can connect to whichever SIM is or whichever network is strongest in that area where the property is. You are always going to have black spots and areas where there is no signal at all. So to mitigate that, during the installation process, we will do a network check. Generally, if a property can only get signal outside the property, we don't advocate for a Switchee to be installed. But yeah, that's the key when we're looking at network coverage. But as long as there's mobile masts and networks, we can connect to them. Okay, so I think that's it. We have come to time. Thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you so much, Barry, for joining and persisting with the technology challenges. If everybody could take a moment after the webinar to answer the survey questions, it'd be appreciated. And I hope everyone's found it useful. You should get the recording followed up soon by the lovely Kiki. But thank you.
Thank you.